So this video is going to be a short and sweet video on the concept of determinism in pushdown automata. So you'll need to remember what a pushdown automata is, and you'll need to remember the concept of determinism versus non-determinism when we talk about them in these machines. So a pushdown automata is deterministic under two conditions. The first is that the transition relation does not contain any transitions that compete with each other. So there's never a situation where we're sitting in a particular state with a particular symbol at the front of the string and a particular configuration of symbols on the stack, and we have two options for where to go. So we have two transitions that let us move on in the same configuration. This is pretty similar to what our definition for determinism was in finite state machines, where we said it's deterministic if the transition relation is actually a transition function. That is, given any state input pair, we've only got one option to go on. This is pretty similar, but the concept of transition relation and transition function get a bit fuzzier, and we almost always talk about just a transition relation in the pushdown automata. But the key basic concept is the same. We never get to a point where we can make it, where we can arguably make more than one choice. The second characteristic of a deterministic pushdown automata is that the machine is never forced to choose between accepting and moving on to another state. That is, we don't have any transitions where we can move from that accepting state, Q, into another state without consuming any input from the string or taking anything off the stack, and where we add something back onto the stack. So what this does is this particular transition takes us out of a potentially accepting configuration, where if we had an empty string and an empty stack we could accept here, and moves us into a situation which is not accepting, where we're now in another state and we've got some input on the stack. If our machine has to make these decisions, then it is no longer deterministic. Now we saw with the finite state machines that when we gave them the ability to be non-deterministic, it made it a little bit easier for us to build finite state machines in some cases, but it didn't make them capable of accepting languages that they couldn't already accept when they were deterministic. So in that sense, adding non-determinism didn't add power to the machine. With pushdown automata, we have to decide this question again. Does adding the non-determinism increase the power of the machine? And when I say increase the power of the machine, I mean, does it let us accept languages with non-determinism if we could not accept them before using deterministic pushdown automata? So I'm not going to answer that question in this video, but what I am going to do is pose you a particular problem. So consider the language of even palindromes from A and B. So that is, they read the same forwards and backwards, and they're even in length, so they don't have a middle character. And the definition of that language is given over here, and you've seen this language already before. You've quite probably done a proof that this language is not regular. Now what I'm showing you here is the first pushdown automata that you see that can accept this language. And the way this machine works is whenever it sees an A or a B, it puts that onto the stack. So let's say the start of our string was A, B, A, and then our string is A, B, A because it's an even length palindrome. We go through and we shove these onto the stack. Sorry, let me make that a B. What you'll notice is that what is appearing on the stack is now the reverse of what we've seen so far. So we saw A, B, B. What we have on the stack is WR, that is B, B, A. So eventually when we decide to transition over here on this epsilon transition, we can now go through and see the last part of the string, which we want to be the reverse of the first part of the string. And because what we have on the stack is now the reverse of the first part of the string, we can pair them off very easily, one by one. And we do that using these transitions, where when we see an A in the string, we must also see an A on the top of the stack, and we pop it off, and the same for a B. And so the only way that we can end up in an accepting state with an empty stack and an empty string is if what we had seen so far was a string that matched this definition. This is a slightly complicated PDA, so I want you to finish this video and then go back and think about this pushdown automata. But what I also want you to think about is whether or not you could take this pushdown automata and remove it, particularly this little bit here, which makes it non-deterministic. Because at any point, if we've got an A, or all of our strings are coming from A, B star. So no matter what we've got sitting on the front of the string, and no matter what we've got sitting on top of the stack, we can always choose to either consume what's on top of on the front of the string here with one of these transitions, or move over here and start checking if what we've got at the end of the string actually matches what's on the stack. I want you to think about whether or not you could actually remove this non-determinism and make this into a deterministic pushdown automata to accept the language here. Now I want you to do it for a little bit just to get an idea. I don't want you to go until you find it, because, hint, you are not going to find it. It is actually impossible to do this. But I want you to think about it, because when we get into the lectures with Nassimul and the tutorials in the future, having an idea why non-determinism adds power will give you a lot of understanding of the rest of the course. So what you should now know is what non-determinism means in a pushdown automata, and I've already sort of given the answer away that non-determinism adds power.